chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Then Jesus said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. And the manager said to himself, what will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? He answered, 100 jugs of oil. He said to him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, and how much do you owe? He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, then they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much. Whoever is dishonest in very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
This is a true story. It was shared to me by a pastor in Houston. I wanted to relay it to you. A church member came to this pastor's study one day. The pastor could see that the man looked deeply troubled. The man said, Pastor, I need to talk to you. I feel so empty, so dried up inside. I'm scared. His voice began to quiver a bit. Pastor, I have come from the doctor's office, and he told me that I have only 6 months at best to live. After I left the office, I realized that I have no spiritual resources, no inner strength to cope with this. There is nothing to fall back on. There's nothing to lean against. Many people would be surprised to hear me say that very thing, for I have made lots of money. And people think I am a success, not only at making money, but at being strong and being a powerful person. He then fell quiet, and the pastor waited in silence for him to continue. Finally, the man said, you know, I am poor in the things that really matter. I am destitute, spiritually destitute. I could pick up the phone and call any bank in Houston and borrow any amount of money to do whatever I wanted to do. Just on my name, Pastor. Just on my name. Do you understand what I am saying? I could borrow it, as much of it as I needed, on my name alone. Pastor leaned forward as the man leaned his head into his hands. I'm trying to remember the story right. And the man said, I guess there are some things you can't buy or borrow. The point that I think this story illustrated as it was shared to me was the man's material bank was full to overflowing. But his spiritual bank was empty, where the true riches are given. The story reminded me of two questions, particularly as I heard this particular man share his 6 months or so left to live. Those two questions were, what would you do if you had nothing to lose? And then a very similar question, what would you do if you had everything to lose? share one more story with you. It's a story about a farmer and his daughter. The farmer and his daughter had much misfortune, as farmers have a very difficult life. And one year, their misfortune was really bad, and a moneylender came from the village to see them. This old and ugly moneylender wanted to make a deal. He fancied the farmer's daughter. She was beautiful. He had been eyeing her for a while. So he proposed a bargain. He said he would forgive the farmer's debt if he could marry the farmer's daughter. Well, both the farmer and the daughter were horrified by this proposal. But the cunning moneylender suggested that they let Providence decide the matter. He told them that he would put 2 pebbles into the money bag, one black and one white. The girl would have to reach in and pick out one of the pebbles. If she picked the black pebble, she would become his wife, and the father's debt would be forgiven. If she picked the white pebble, she need not marry the moneylender, and the father's debt would still be forgiven. If she refused to pick a pebble, her father would be thrown into jail until the debt was paid. Very clever, he thought. He smiled to himself. They were standing on a pebble-strewn path in the farmer's field, and so as they talked, the moneylender bent over and picked up 2 pebbles, one white and one black, and stuck them in the money bag. However, the sharp-eyed girl noticed he picked up 2 black pebbles and snuck them in the bag. What was the girl to do? What would you counsel her to do in that situation? If she refused to pick a pebble, then her father would be in trouble. If she chose to reveal the moneylender as a cheat and pick both pebbles, then knowing the character of the moneylender, he would probably be forced to do something unpleasant and vengeful. So what do you think the girl did? Well, this is what she did. She put her hand into the money bag and drew out a pebble without looking at it and without immediately showing it. She fumbled the pebble and let it drop into the pebble-strewn path, where it immediately got lost among the other pebbles. "Oh, how clumsy of me," she said. "But never mind, if you look into the bag for the one that is left, you will be able to tell which pebble I picked." Since the remaining pebble was black, it would have been assumed that she had picked the white one. And since the moneylender dared not admit his dishonesty, the girl would have changed what seemed like an impossible situation into an extremely advantageous one. Shrewdness. That is the definition of shrewdness. Shrewdness is taking what seems like an impossible situation and turning it into an extremely advantageous one. There's nothing wrong with it. When we are acting shrewdly, what we are doing is we are looking at what we have and utilizing what we have in order to achieve what you might consider a more advantageous outcome or situation. In our gospel text today, Jesus is talking to 2 groups. He's talking to the disciples who are sitting at the table with him, but he's also talking to the Pharisees that are there eavesdropping on the conversation. So Jesus is actually talking to both. And it's known, says Luke in the Gospel, that the Pharisees are lovers of money. So to both groups, he says, be shrewd towards the kingdom of God. In other words, leverage, that's a great word, leverage what you have, your money, your talents, and your faculties, to reflect the owner's character and purposes. So how do we leverage what comes from God? Does it reflect God's character and purpose? Jesus shares a great example of this later on. It's not our lectionary, so I got to tell you. In Luke 19. It's about Jesus' encounter with a dishonest manager, tax collector. His name is Zacchaeus. Jesus goes to town and he seeks out Zacchaeus. He targets Zacchaeus. He says, Zacchaeus, I'm going to eat with you today. We think it's an amazing thing that Jesus did this, as did the other tax collectors and the Pharisees. For Zacchaeus was known as someone who was corrupt and greedy and a cheat. Jesus, later, after having fellowship with Zacchaeus at his house, goes to leave the house, and Zacchaeus says, I vow to pay back everyone that I ever cheated, and then give half of all I have to the poor. To which Jesus responded, today salvation has come to this house. There's that big word, salvation. That gift that gathers us here and gives us hope, among other things. Salvation, that gift of relationship with God, founded upon God's unconditional love. The love of the shepherd for the lost sheep. That love. The love of a father racing out to a prodigal child and going out to the eldest, encouraging and imploring him to come into the feast. That love for us. We can see in this story of Zacchaeus that a heart immersed in such love looks like generosity. Nothing changed about Zacchaeus except the fact that he was making things right and then giving half of everything to the poor. And Jesus makes the testament at that point that salvation is here. So if anything, we can say that that might be what salvation looks like in the heart of a community or a person. Zacchaeus goes on to begin to demonstrate the character of the owner in generosity. And likewise, loving others and building relationships shall become his purpose. And who better than Zacchaeus? I mean, as crafty and conniving as Zacchaeus was, what better resource to spread the love of God? To utilize the gifts of God in someone like Zacchaeus. Jesus was acting very shrewdly, was he not? Like the girl in our story with the pebbles. How might we, as children of light, turn what seems like an impossible situation into an advantageous one for God's kingdom? How might we reflect God's character and purpose in who we are, using what we have? There are 3 suggestions I'd like us to think about as we read it. And it comes right from our gospel text today. The first is doing what everyone else seems to be doing in this text. Acknowledge Jesus at our table. Listen to Jesus. Follow his lead. Embrace his teaching. Even question it if you must. But engage Jesus at the table. Not only this table, but every table we gather around this week. this month, this year, throughout your life. And pray. Pray about it. Pray for guidance. Pray for God to show you again and again what you need. The second thing is to give thanks. Give thanks for what you have. Talents, possessions, and faculties. All come from God. All come from the owner in our parable. If so, if we live thankfully and we realize that it all comes from God, then the question of losing everything or losing nothing becomes mute. Because that assumes that it is ours to lose, when it's ours rather to use. To use from God for life. And reconnecting with that realization helps us to do the third thing. Respond. Respond as the manager responded. Take a risk. Employ to the fullest what has been entrusted to reflect the owner. And then once you see, the Bible tells us it is guaranteed you will, once you see the joy and the blessings of the eternal riches, the true riches that are ours in Christ, we will invite others into that endeavor. Invite others to discover and receive the true riches, which money cannot buy or borrow, and a very active spiritual life. Let us pray. Gracious Father, every single good and perfect gift comes from you. May we give thanks daily for our bread, our talents, our faculties, our breath. May we show thanks in generous living, so that we might reflect your character and purpose in this life, that all people may